Good evening, Bill Wadman.
Good evening, Sandy Robertson.
We've got a really quite a special session this evening, I think.
A
Um,
very special episode of Speaking of Seeing.
yes, I've called it a late great um, with some sadness on your behalf. I
Hmm.
didn't know myself, the photographer that we're going to talk about tonight, but you did very, very well.
Yep,
So tonight we are having a conversation about the life and work of William Coupon.
William Coupon.
Bill, you really will need to take charge with this evening because I
Sure.
have the stuff that I can normally dig up about people, but you have
Yeah.
the inside line.
It's an interesting thing because um, I I've been a portrait photographer for I don't know 20 something years now, and 6 or 7 years into it, I always loved really simple portraits with simple lighting and that kind of thing. And I came upon uh, I'll call him Coupon because I called him Coupon. Coupon's work uh, way back in the day, and we actually used him on an episode of On Taking Pictures, and that's actually how I met him. We talked about his work, and he must have had a Google search thing or something, and he listened to it, and he was mad at me because I was talking more about the famous people than his ethnographic work, and he he in his brain thinks that that is more important. Uh, and I don't know. I said something else that he disagreed with or something. I forget what it was. And I said, "Well, you're in New York. Maybe we can have lunch and talk about it." And we did. And then we became lunch friends. And I would go over his house when he lived in New York still. Uh, and we'd go out to lunch, and I helped him on a couple shoots that he was doing. I tried to talk him into using his film cameras again, which he never did because at the time he was shooting on a little 5D. I always thought the magic of the William Coupon portraits was the squareness of them, um, the literal square shape of them, not the uncoolness of them. Um,
Definitely not uncool.
no, no, but it's interesting because you can like read a lot online, the stuff that he said about himself, but not that many people said that much stuff about him.
Mm.
Apparently, an hour ago, the New York Times published an obituary of him, uh, which is, you know, a big deal to have a like an obituary, an illustrated obituary in the New York Times. Um, and for him, he started out and he started taking pictures like in these clubs in Studio 54, and then he got in with like the punk groups at the time. Uh, this is a picture I took of him in 2017. I was like, I want to get a picture of you from the position that you take pictures of people in.
Mm.
And so he pulled out a Rolleiflex, which I don't think he had used in 25 years.
What I
Uh,
think is really great listening to you talk is that you have like a compressed history of the man, which is, I think, what you're saying. You know, people
yeah.
are obsessed with talking about the famous people he photographed. And he really did photograph everyone, didn't he? I mean, he cut his teeth in the late 70s, as you said, in Studio 54, and then on
Yeah.
to the Mud Club in Manhattan.
Yep.
Met everybody from punks to presidents and
Yeah. And in the
photographed
end,
them.
when he started getting work for doing Time Magazine stuff was a big deal. And
Mm,
then he started shooting advertisements for Issey Miyake,
yeah.
the fashion designer. And that's what got him connected with a lot of the people that he shot were jobs for Issey Miyake,
Mm.
from what I understand.
You said
But yeah, I mean, he
just
was in
before
this
we
world
started,
right
you
here.
talked about and you also mentioned it again there, the kind of the square format of the
Yeah.
photographs and how
Yeah.
film photographs have this other kind of quality to them. So there's a lot of contact sheets that I've been able to find. So actually, I don't think either had seen these images, these ones. I mean, all the other ones you know extremely well. But it
Sure.
seems to me that he did take like, lots and lots of photographs before picking out maybe one. Can you shed any light on that?
I can't specifically, but he shot a lot of stuff that no one ever saw. I'm sure people saw, but that was not public knowledge. In fact, I was even looking for some copies of these images to use in our conversation in his book, William Coupon Portraits.
Hmm.
that came out on Damiani, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Um,
I'm just gonna do the advert.
oh, you have a copy?
Yeah, it's a brilliant book.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and he, he had the things that people, I mean, listen, he was a commercial portrait person. He was making money off the usage of these images. So the images of the presidents, the images of some of the famous people, the musicians, the Basquiat, and those kinds of things. He had decent high res versions of those at his fingertips, but then he had this huge archive of negatives that he would occasionally like stick down on a scanner and scan for something.
Hmm.
But he wasn't a technical photographer, and he wasn't one of those people who, while he was a bit of a pack rat about stuff, he wasn't great at keeping it all organized. Like it was as convoluted as the stuff going on in his head often, I think, was. Where, just before we were talking, I was trying to find the date on a picture I took of him, and it took me all of 30 seconds to, like, I was waiting for the hard drive. I knew where it was, I just had to go find it. I don't know that if you said to Coupon, hey, where's the pictures of those punks where they're, laughing and whatever it is, he'd be like, I don't know. I could imagine him being very sort of, aloof about it.
What I love about this, though, is that in terms of having like a contact sheet, for most people, contact sheets are full of duds.
Yeah.
And actually, that's
Well,
not this. Every single image in this is kind of beautiful.
could work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it may be that, I mean, and I'm not speaking for him in any way, but it may be that that's why you get to see this contact sheet as opposed to others. Some of them
sure.
worked as, sometimes contact sheets work as a single image, I found, and there's certain contact sheets that are more expressive than others. I mean, the fact that he got access to death row inmates in Florida in 1979, I mean, it would be so hard to do this now, for
Mm.
you to go in with your backdrop. He painted his own backdrops. So this is the one. He only used a handful. He used like 3 that he would use over and over again. But I think one time he told me he painted like 8 or 10 of them, and only a few of them really worked as backdrops. Part of the reason why I paint my own backdrops is because I was trying to be like him,
Mm.
even before I met him. But yeah, he painted these backdrops, and he had them, and he would use them over and over again. And later there's a picture of Reagan we'll get to, which I think is the same backdrop as this one. And it's sort of it's this colored, like this warm colored one that he had. And I remember all the time that I knew him, I never actually saw that backdrop. I was like, where is it? He's like, oh, it's in storage. It's in a tube. It's blah, 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 blah. But he would never take it out. He had this other gray one that you'll also see in some other pictures up, that he would shoot people against. And I was like, oh, where is that one? And then one time, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, he came to New York to shoot a job for the New York Times. And he shipped all of his gear to his friend Mark's house. And I go over to Mark's house to meet him and Mark. We were going to go out to lunch or whatever. And he's like, oh, all your stuff's in the back room. And I was like, wait, what stuff's in the back room? He's like, oh, backdrop, whatever. And I go in the back room, and it was this backdrop rolled out, like this backdrop that I had seen in all these pictures and sort of hero worshipped a bit when I didn't know him. And it was actually the one that, it kind of felt like going to see the actual painting that you love, and you walk into the gallery and you're like, yeah, that's the actual thing, not just a reproduction or a photograph of it. That's the object. So the object itself like had some weird meaning, and it was like threadbare, and it was kind of falling apart. And that's the reason why he didn't use it anymore, because he had kind of destroyed it. But even those things had sort of an object quality to them, at least in my mind. I'm sure with him too. Yeah, that's the grayer one that he used.
I do find that I'm in an airless space in his photographs, which is weird because they're full of life.
Yeah.
Even this, I mean, but there's a stillness in them, which is what I mean by airless, I suppose, that really does, in terms of capturing a person on film or in a photograph.
Yeah.
That's the X factor, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, and he would put up his backdrop wherever he could a lot of times, there's a portrait he took. He was shooting Bill Clinton for Time magazine before he became president, but after he was elected. So in the 3 months that he was leading up to his inauguration.
Hmm.
And he goes to the state house in Alabama to go do it. Alabama? Not Alabama, Arkansas to do it. Um, and apparently Hillary Clinton came and brought him into the house and whatever it is, because of, Arkansas. And she left the room while he was setting up, and he was up on a chair taping his backdrop to the wall of the mansion, the governor's mansion in Arkansas. And she came in and she's like, Mr. Coupon, aren't you aware that you're like standing on a 300-year-old chair? And apparently he said something along the lines of, but Mrs. Clinton, aren't you moving anyway? You know, and they had a laugh. And, it's like, I think it's like there was a surprising amount of, sorry, door buzzer is buzzing. There was a surprising amount of formality and informality, I think, in the interactions that he had with some people. It feels like those people came to him and they were in his little studio, but often it was him bringing his little studio to them, which happened a lot.
And it is a little studio. It is a little studio, isn't it? I mean, it's not a big
studio. It is a backdrop and one medium-sized softbox and a strobe. And his camera. I mean, there was not a lot to it. One time we were out to lunch. This was early on when we were friends, and he's like, "Oh, so-and-so is coming over to get their picture taken." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'll help you set up if you want." I was trying to see, because I wanted to see his process,
Mm.
And I went back and I helped him put the backdrop up, and I put together a softbox and I put it on the head and I stuck it where I would put it if I was trying to be William Coupon. And then I kind of stood back and I wanted him to go up and move it to where, I thought he'd sit there and, let me maneuver it and find the right light. He didn't touch it at all. He just started shooting. So he left it exactly where I put it. So he was not precious about that kind of stuff.
No, but does that speak to genius or complacency or what?
I think that he wasn't a super particular. He took what he did seriously, but he was not one of those pixel peeper, everything has to be absolutely perfect kind of people.
Mm.
He used to shoot F-16, just stop down. He'd put warming filters on. He did certain things that made his life easier so that he, nothing would be out of focus, but also he stopped down enough that he actually kind of diffraction starts coming in. So it's a little softer than it would be if you shot at F8 or F11,
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way he did things. He had his strobe set at what it was. He had his camera at F16 and everything just worked. So he didn't have to meter. He didn't have to, it was a very factory-like process. Once he had his process locked in, he didn't like to change it.
But does that then create a kind of freedom within the photograph
Sure.
itself?
Yeah.
If you are somebody who's obsessed with the technical details of something, are you not missing the heartbeat, or
And there are those photographers out there. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, interestingly enough, he was strangely disarming. He was a bit of an odd little man, but he had a way about him that you kind of, he was a real character. So you could imagine sort of letting him, he wasn't charming in a Hollywood kind of, hey, I'm your best friend now, that he wasn't that kind of charming. He was oh, who is this interesting person in front of me taking my pictures kind of charming. And so I think it made people, I don't know, people were interested, and I think they gave him time because of that.
You have said in the past that he got annoyed that people were so obsessed with his celebrity photographs, and in actual fact, he has a huge archive of what he thought of as ethnographic documentation.
He went a lot of different places. Yep, he would travel with his little kit because it was small. He would go places and shoot, especially in the 80s and early 90s. He would go and he would photograph people. I think he liked. I think he would spend a lot of time, even on vacation. Recently, he would, go to places that he would go to Mexico a lot. He would go, to South America, all these kinds of places that he wouldn't be going to Paris and taking pictures. He'd be going to other places, And I think he felt.
what was the purpose to this? This is like
You
somebody
know,
who works for National Geographic says, right, I'm going to go out into the wilderness of wherever.
I don't know exactly, but I don't think we ever talked about it specifically. But I think that Irving Penn did the same kind of stuff where he would go places and take pictures of people that maybe weren't normally photographed. And I
Mm.
think that there was some draw to seeing the normally ignored. I think there was some element of that.
Was he
Um,
um was he a stickler for beauty?
he was an appreciator of beauty, um, a stickler for it. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Did he reject things on the basis that they were not beautiful to him?
Objects in his own world, yes. I don't know if that extended to his work. Um, I think he appreciated that definitions of beauty are malleable. You know.
Mm. But I mean, he
Uh,
did photograph celebrities
yep.
and
Yep. That's the cover of his book, and not everyone got along with him. I mean,
mm,
George Harrison was in a bad mood when he was getting photographed by him. Miles was apparently kind of went along with it, but didn't really want to be there. Um, like it doesn't always work. I always find that interesting with like, portrait photographers. You hear these stories of people, and it's like they photographed everybody. Like, how did they do that? And then the reality is that some people you really got along with, and some people you really didn't get along with. Um, and it's I don't know. But I don't know that it matters in the end. He has this picture of Miles Davis that is very well known. Um, Sometimes that animosity or that awkwardness actually leads to a good photo in the end. You also have people like Miles Davis and George Harrison who have had their picture taken 200,000 times, right?
mm.
So like they can turn it on if they have to for a minute and a half while you're taking a couple rolls of film. Um, but I mean, something about the contrast, especially of this image, because Miles was a dark skinned guy, so like playing with the contrast and doing this like black and white look on this. He had a print of this picture that I saw once that was a really nice darkroom print of it. It wasn't just like a C print or an inkjet. It was like a darkroom black and white print of it that was absolutely beautiful. Um, so sometimes he would send stuff out and get stuff printed really nice.
Did he surround himself with his own photographs?
There were a lot up in his apartment or in his house. Yeah, I mean not all. There was other people's stuff too. Um, so there was, but yeah, I mean there were, and a guy at his level like him. I mean, there's lots of prints and frames that came from galleries shows, and you know what I mean. There's like all that kind of stuff. It's like where do I store all this stuff that I'm waiting to send somewhere else or has been sent back to me or that kind of thing.
Was photography
Oh, I love that picture. I'm not a
meaningful?
huge Ronald Reagan fan, but this is the picture that turned me on to Coupon in the first place.
Bill,
Yes.
I I want to try and go into this quite slowly. You're extremely and rightfully enthusiastic talking about your friend.
Yep. Go
I
ahead.
find it so great that there's a kind of touch point, selfishly for me, via you to him. And I am curious about him. And
Mhm.
I'm curious not because I just like his portraits, but because I am interested in him as a person. And it's really struck me that there's a sense that he perhaps got a bit narked talking always about celebrity. And so here's our chance to kind of go slowly into this.
Sure.
Did photography define him as a man?
Oh, I don't know that I could answer that. I will. One thing
No,
one
but
thing I
if
will
it,
say.
you don't have to answer it on his behalf. You can
I
tell me what
think
you
that
think.
I think that I think his photography stood in front of him in the public space. I think that if people think about him, they think about his picture, this picture that's on the screen. I think they picture the pictures of the punks. I think they see the pictures of Basquiat. I think they see those things. I think because he generally shot individual people, those individuals, and then his name is at the bottom. He's almost like hidden behind the photographs in a lot of ways.
Sure, but I'm
Uh,
wondering, as somebody who was very close to the man himself,
yeah,
was his life made up of photography? Like, were
it
there
was
other
a
things in
sure.
him? You know, it's like I'm not trying to diminish him to like a sort of
No, no, no.
caricature.
I am not trying to do that. I'm not trying to distract from the question. I genuinely don't. He was a not an easy person to know, and he
Yeah.
was not an he was not. He would tell you a story every once in a while, but he didn't talk about his feelings a lot. He didn't talk about what was going on in his head all that often. You know,
And this is
so
why I wonder, is somebody like him, and obviously you've spoken to me about him over our years together, but most particularly very recently. When somebody's very difficult to know and they put things in the way, the barrier is up so that you can't get that close. Nonetheless, you were very close to him. So I'm wondering about your sense of who he was as a man.
yeah, I think I I honestly, as somebody who I think knew him as well as anybody, and I've spoken to a few other people who knew him. I did not know a lot of his friends. I met a handful of them, but I've met a couple of them in the past few weeks, um, since all this happened, and all of us sort of had similar stories of, um, he would call and he would chat and he would talk about himself, whatever he was doing. It wasn't deep conversation about what was going on in his head. It was like, I'm driving to Las Vegas. I'm like, okay, where are you going to Vegas? Oh, I'm going to visit so and so. Okay, cool. And then you'd say, oh, I was doing this thing yesterday. And he'd be like, yeah, that's great. So I'm driving to Vegas. Like it was very much always wanted to turn the light back on him,
Hmm.
which which after the fact is just sort of a funny thing for his friends to sort of, oh, he did that to you too kind of way, you know.
Isn't that
um
interesting in somebody who spent their life with celebrities who are often extremely demanding of attention?
yeah, yeah, but I think, I mean, as far as I know, I don't think he ever spent tons of time with most of these people. I think a lot of these shoots were very quick,
Mm.
you know.
And of course, he
It's
did spend time with this model.
Yeah, this is the day actually that I set up the light for him, and he's like, sit down, I'll take a picture of you. And he took a few pictures of me, and this is one of them from 10 years ago.
Mm.
um so yeah,
Was
it
that
was weird too.
self-consciousness that made you touch your hair there, Bill?
Oh, because I had a different haircut then too. I didn't have any more hair, I just had a different haircut. I need one now. um but it's interesting because I was, it's funny. I was annoyed by the fact that he was shooting this 2x3 vertical.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because it would, okay, here's an example. I'm going to get a little techie photography for a second like that.
I'll brace
When he,
myself in case I don't understand.
well, you will understand. I don't know if the people watching will understand. He used to shoot with an 80 millimeter lens on a two and a quarter camera, on a 6x6 camera. Uh, More later in his career was a Rolly 6006, which is a kind of a weird, rare camera that you can't even get the batteries for anymore. Um, but he would shoot with a normal lens. If you wanted to, you could shoot with, say, a 5D. If you shot with a 35 millimeter lens, you could crop it square and you will get almost exactly the same framing as you would get on an 80 millimeter lens on a square camera like a Hasselblad or a Rolly. I tried to explain this to him. I was like, you could get the same exact framing that you got before on digital if you do it this way. but instead he would use a 50 millimeter 1.8 plastic Canon lens on a thing, stop down to f16. Like he was just like, I use a standard normal lens, so I'm going to use a standard normal lens on this camera. And it's like, well, yes, but if you use the slightly wider lens, you could crop square and get the same look that you were getting before. And he just would not have it. I think it was just sort of like, that's too much complexity. I'm just not getting involved. And it always, I don't know. I always wanted to, I wanted to see him get back to shooting film, or at least shooting square, because I thought that's when his pictures really sang. Um, and I was never able to do it in the 10 years, the 15 years that I knew him. Trump, by the way, did not want to hold that bird, was very uncomfortable with it, and it pooped in his hands. There's the story from the Trump picture that I know.
So here we are going a span that is really, I mean, I guess first he kind of emerged, I suppose, in public consciousness as a photographer in the very late 70s. He was working tirelessly throughout the whole of the 80s, traveling extensively,
Yep.
photographing famous people already, getting a name for himself. And then through all these years, he's collected images, but I don't know, possibly not collected other relationships or other kinds of relationships apart from the ones that have that barrier there.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to his, him and his friends. I mean, he was married, he had a daughter, but yeah, and this is the picture I took of him in 2016. I'll tell you one story. I usually went to him in downtown New York, and one day he came out to Brooklyn, and we were up at the diner up the hill that I go to, and we were like finishing up lunch, and he said, do you have that corner that you take pictures in? Do you still have that set up? And I said, yeah. I said, why? He said, well, I haven't had my picture taken in a while. And, as someone for whom he was a bit of a hero, to have that person suggest that I take their picture in my setting, it's at least it's something of yeah, you got it, kid. You know what I mean? That there was like a little bit of a pat on the back element to it. And this is the picture that he used in his book for himself. So yeah, it's weird. It's he moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico right before COVID. And so he was living down there until he died a couple weeks ago. So I went down to visit him a couple of times, but saw him less than I did. And he came up here a few times in the last 6 years, but yeah, he's one of a kind.
Yeah, and I think to just make this something that, as your friend, I think is important, is to acknowledge that he did choose you in lots of ways as his friend, and he also then chose you to be close enough to him that perhaps the barrier came down a bit. You were there when he died. You were very good to him, very patient with somebody who sounds like he was quite an irascible, curmudgeonly character. And
But
the legacy of William Coupon is something that lots of people will feel they have some kind of insight into or about because we think we can see him through his photographs. But do you see him through his photographs any longer?
No, I see him, not the pictures. it's funny. It's like the more you get to know somebody, a lot of times that's a hero of yours, the less you see them as a hero. You see him more and more as a person. Um, and it's yeah, I would go down there. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot you took all these super famous pictures of these people that are going to be the picture that's remembered of some guy who was president. Um,
Bill,
it's a hell of a legacy.
when he photographed you, did you think to
Yeah,
yourself, I'm being photographed by William Coupon?
yeah, I did. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Can't you
very
can't you see it in my eyes?
much. Thank you very much for sharing your story of friendship with this person, with us, with me, and then with anyone who's watching. I think it's a
It's my
really
pleasure.
special, brave thing to do.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. He was a hell of a guy.
And I have to say, it sounds to me like you have been a hell of a friend.
I tried.